Is this Arrow Social Hour? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, we never did an intro for Arro Social Hour.
We never did. So you need to do an intro. Welcome to Arrow Social Hour.
Yep.
I'm Phil.
I'm Bob Anglin, and welcome to Arro Social Hour. Today we're going to be talking about influence and what makes an influencer. And we'll be right back. When you really start looking at what makes a person an influencer, and it's not just about numbers.
No, it's not.
Right?
It
starts at 10 followers, right?
Yes.
It starts at 1 follower. This is what I want to talk about. So if you're not recording, you should probably start recording.
I am recording.
So I can cut back to it if I need to.
Yeah.
So there's a years ago, before I met you, I had become a John Maxwell certified coach and speaker. So I had to read tons of John Maxwell. It's kind of how you are with the 7 habits.
Yep.
I did with John Maxwell. Some of it, it was a wonderful process of learning this stuff. For me, I have a lot. I'm now realizing I have a lot of blockers that have stopped me from being as successful as I could be with it.
It's probably me.
No, it's not you. It's not you at all. It's me. And what it is the good part about it is I can write a speech and go out and give speeches, right? That's not the part that makes you successful at all. That's actually, yes, that's the talent part that can make you be a great speaker, but being a great speaker has nothing to do with being a successful monetarily speaker that can get out there and do it. It's the same thing as what's going to make anybody able to do be good on YouTube or anything else. It's the desire to push, right? To push yourself out there, right?
Yes.
Like I was just watching this Grant Cardone thing, Unbreakable thing, and we had talked about doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the things he says in there, he goes, if you don't like sales, if you have a trouble with sales, it's because you don't like money. And the truth is, I don't. Right? It's not important. Money is a necessity to me that as an older man, I now realize I need it more.
Right.
Especially because I have people that depend on me. And if I didn't have those people, I would need it a lot less. I could happily work at a restaurant, thinking McDonald's. And as long as I got my basics paid for, I'm fine with that. Right.
That's interesting.
I don't need anything. Right. The truth is, I'll do it. Me and my wife had 1 car until we moved to San Antonio. I had to get a second car because my job forced me to drive from one place to another at noon every day. I was going to ride the bus every day to work. And when I couldn't ride the bus to work, they changed that up on me. I had to get a car. I don't care if I have a car. I don't care about stuff. I like to do things. I would rather save my money up and go do something.
Right.
But I don't need anything. I don't want anything. That is a thing.
I like money. I like money more than my wife likes money. Like I'm the bigger spender in my wife's and my relationship.
Mm-hmm. And my wife is the bigger spender, right?
Right.
And she likes stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want stuff, right? I don't need stuff.
Yeah.
I need a safe place to sleep.
No, I've seen that about you.
Food to eat and peace of mind. Those are the 3 things I care about most, right?
Yes.
And of course I extend those things to my family.
Absolutely.
I want them to have a safe
Make sure that they have a safe place.
Safe place to sleep. I want them to have the food that they need to eat, and I want them to have peace of mind.
Yes.
Right? They want other things. Okay, that's fine. They're different people than I am.
Right.
But in my mind,
got their own drivers.
And I want to create things because I can't help it.
Correct.
I was watching Jordan Peterson the other day. He goes, a person who is a creative person is not necessarily a great thing. He says, he says a creative person, if they're not being creative, they'll start rotting. It's terrible for them. Their life is miserable if they're not creating. He says, he's like an expert, honestly. He's a psychologist, and one of his expertise is dealing with people who are creative, right? And dealing with the problem, but he goes, they're the best people to have at the highest levels of companies, and they're the worst person to start out at a company. Because when someone's starting out at your company, you're trying to get them to conform to your culture, and our creative people don't do that. What makes them creative is they do the opposite, right? And then when you get up to upper echelons, who's up in the upper echelons? Not creative people, right? It's hard for a creative person to work their way up through a corporation. And I've seen that too.
I've probably got a little bit. I probably got a little bit of creativity. Like I've probably got 50% creativity, but then enough push engineering to make sure that I can control it to do what needs to be done to push forward, right? So I'm probably a 50-50 hybrid.
Or you're that person who's very organized, that organization part of you, right? That dot every I, cross every T person has been raised to have with a lot of creativity.
Yes, that's right? Basically it, right? Yeah. So I'm basically a hybrid. I'm a hybrid mix of both, is what I found.
Well, that's why people who are really good at math tend to also be musicians, right?
Yeah.
Or they're not, right? A musician, the music is good for people who are really that intellectual, that analytical side, because it helps them be creative.
Yep.
It adds creativity to it, but music is all mathematical.
Yes.
Right. I think so. I don't know, right? But well, I think that
it's the thing it's the reason why they say it soothes the savage beast, right? Because it eases the mind when it gets distracted, right?
Yeah, like the top 10 people in my graduating class, some of them went on to be doctors, and doctors. One became a chemical engineer. I mean, they all went on to these especially the very sciences. Almost all of them were in orchestra or band.
Yep.
Right. Or a couple of them were in choir, but most of them were in orchestra and band. Yep. Because they had spent their parents had put them in those things early, which was smart for their parents. And they were very gifted in those areas. But the intellectual and the creative work together really well. And I think that's why music is so important to school programs that people don't realize, right?
Yes.
Even having been a theater teacher, I think that theater is not as it's for different kids, right? It's really about how the administration of a school thinks about the different parts, right? So for some kids, music is really important for them. Some of them it's art, and some of them it's going to be theater.
Yes.
But the problem is that what you have is the kids who don't want to get an instrument end up getting kicked to art or theater.
Yes.
They begin to be the default dumping place for the kids who don't want to do anything.
That's what's sad is if it becomes the dumping ground, right? It shouldn't be a dumping ground. It should be a thriving, growing ground versus a dumping.
Well,
right?
It's an elective.
Yes.
And if you're there, then you need to elect to be there.
Correct.
If a kid does not want to be there, they should not be there.
Right.
Right. There needs to be another elective option in the arts. And like the state of Texas doesn't have this. They have actually a couple of cool hybrids of this, but that are interesting. But they need to have a place where kids are exposed to arts in general.
Yes.
Right. So they're not forced to act when they don't want to act, because if you take theater, you have to act.
Right.
If you take art, you have to draw. But being something that takes you through all of the different arts and find out if one of them is something they're interested in. And then next year,
and send you to
say, I liked the theater part of that thing.
The expert of that. Yeah.
Right. And they still get their art elective. If they don't want to do any more arts, fine. They've gotten it done. They've done their 1 year of arts, and they can graduate with the same thing as anybody else. Right.
Correct. Yeah. Get a taste of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And the truth is, that's how kindergarten was originally created, is look for what kids are talented in.
Yes. And then send them Like,
Yeah, start work. Grammar school was about finding out what a kid does well, and then the upper levels were about putting them in that position so they can be better at that.
correct. But if you cut it out in middle school, then how do you ever know? Right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem. If you
Mhm.
remove it in the middle grade, when you're still finding out what's going on with your body and your life and everything else around you, how can you ever figure anything out? Right?
Mhm.
That's what's ridiculous is you're removing things well before children even figure out what's going on in life. Like that's
Well, and
just
you know what is the bigger, I think the biggest disservice is a disservice. The biggest disservice is that the mentality in schools, um, and of course, I'm not saying this about all teachers, I'm saying the
right,
general mentality of the education system decides what's more and what is a better thing to be as a human being and what is a lesser thing to be as a human being. So yes, at the same time as we're saying, oh, you need to be diverse on race and culture and blah 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 blah, there is literally no diversity of talents,
right.
right?
So that
There
a
is
person
there
can choose versus the school choosing.
college. It's really, I mean, this is the word, this thing, it drives me crazy. I actually got in a fight with somebody once, but back when I drove for a Lyft, I actually had a driver in my car and we got into it. She got freaking frantic. I was fine.
Of
But
course,
I
I've
said,
seen that.
college is not for everyone.
No, it's
And the
not.
mentality that a person is a better person because they go to college is prevalent in the educational system. A bunch of people who have jobs that are constantly complaining that they don't get paid enough are telling kids that they need to take the same path as them.
Yeah, that seems ridiculous,
Right?
right?
Teachers teach kids how to be teachers, how to succeed in school. They don't teach them how to succeed in life in most cases. I'm not saying some don't. Honestly, the ones who teach them to succeed in life most are probably coaches, right?
Correct.
Because they teach them some basic principles of how to overcome obstacles, work your way through,
And be
and
consistent.
achieve a goal as a team,
Yes.
right? If they're a good coach.
Yes.
But you have in most education systems, right, where you have this mentality where everybody has to go to college and they're so
Everybody
proud.
has to do this.
Every kid signed up for college.
And this is the
Right?
only path.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there was somebody else who did a longitudinal study at a school I worked at. 100% of the seniors all got accepted to a college. And they got all these accolades.
Well, that's great if the kid wants to, or the student wants to.
They had all these accolades for the state from that. In the kids who were the best kids in the school, the top kids, most of those kids dropped out after the first year of college, right? You still had a massive dropout rate, any of them that didn't go to college, and a lot of them because they had no business going to college. They didn't have the academics really to be going to college. Had a huge debt at the end of that year.
Oh,
That they now
well, that's
have to pay
sad.
without a
Yeah,
college.
now they have a huge debt, and now they have a hole to start off with.
Yeah, this is actually the real problem with college debt, right? The big problem with college debt is a massive amount of kids who have no business going to college.
Right.
Not because they're inferior in any way, but because that is not the path they should be on. They would be better off spending 6 months or even better learning in high school how to be a welder
trade
and making $30 an hour when they get out of school, and then plus overtime because they work their butt off, and they're making twice as much as their teacher within a year of being out of school, than to go to college and owe $100,000 a year later
and try to pay for it.
Not that much, probably $20,000 a year later, and drop out because they're miserable.
Right.
Right. It's a disservice because you're not trying to find out what a person's purpose is. You're trying to find out how I can rack numbers up to make the government happy because of public special interest groups who are pushing the government to think
want to fund a college or a university.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Of course, colleges are going to take all the money, and they don't care because the money got to the college. They're not the one paying it back. right? If all of a sudden colleges had to pay back the loans on students that don't keep going, it would be a totally different ballgame.
Right.
Right. They would stop handing out $20,000 loans to 18-year-olds that barely even got into their school.
Right.
Or they
barely made it out of high school. Right. If you barely make it out of high school, you're probably not going to do so well in college.
And that's not totally true, but is largely true, right? I was a B- student. Didn't like school. All of my work was because I slopped it together at the last minute, got it done.
That's true. But once you get in your specialty, you'll probably do better.
And as soon as I stepped into college where I was studying what I cared about, which was theater, I was a student all the way through. I was on the dean's list almost every semester. I was taking 20 credit hours at a time and still on the dean's list.
Yeah, right? Because you're doing what you love.
And had no problem getting those grades.
Well, and that's just it. Once my girls got into doing what they love, their scores went up. That's not the same in engineering because engineering gets a lot tougher, right? Once you get into the specifics of engineering, it gets a lot tougher. At least.
Well, I have a friend. I've told you often about my friend who's an engineer.
Yeah.
And he failed his way through engineering school, right?
Yep.
He expected, once he got to a certain level, he expected to fail the class at least once the first time and then have to take it again and work his way through it and pass it the next time.
It gets tough, right? There's a reason why there's books and you have to learn and you have to educate and like it's some difficult material. It's you don't want engineers to just kind of squeeze by and hope that they make it, right? You want them to understand the material, and there's a reason why you test, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of brilliant engineers in there. There's some engineers that just coasted by, but they also don't just put one engineer on the job, right? They put several engineers working together and making sure that they collaborate. It's called a team for a reason.
And you know what? I remember, and this could take you to another level, right? I remember this engineer and this welder, this lady who was actually a welder, and she was very good at what she did, a machinist welder. And this engineer had designed this thing, and she's like, "That's not going to work." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And he did all his math. She goes. When this bend happens in the metal, she understood the metal. This was the difference, right? She goes, where is this material going to go?
Right.
When I bend this metal this way, where's the material going to go? It has to go somewhere, and you're not compensating for material going somewhere else.
Right.
When I make it, right? She goes, so I'm going to make it like this. Yep. Now she takes her expertise, a welder, and then she tells the engineer, this is how I'm going to do it. You're telling me to make it this way. I can't make it that way. I'm going to make it this way. So the metal can be over here. I'm going to have to get this metal. And she changed his design, which looked beautiful on paper.
Yeah.
And it worked
smart
because she knew the metal and she knew it from an artistic, guttural level, right? She had an intuitive level.
From a welding sense, right?
Her experience with metal was more than just the bookwork, right?
Right. Metallurgical standpoint, right? It's going to expand, it's going to move, it's going to flex, all those things, right?
And that was what she was saying. The bend, when this bends, the metal goes somewhere, and you're not allowing for that. If I cast it, I could do that.
Maybe.
But if I cast it, you're not going to get the strength
that you want.
That you're going to get that we want out of the material that you're asking me to use, right?
Yeah.
So she had to fix it. She basically fixed his design, which is great because that's what brings me back around to what I'm saying, right? Is this mentality that this path in life is for everyone. Doesn't allow for people to become really wonderful at other things.
Correct.
Right? And we've talked about this in the arts, right? If I ever had a nonprofit, it would be about taking those kids that barely made it out of high school or dropped out altogether and showing them how they can use their creative side and still make a living, through media, and teaching them the technologies they need to know that goes with the techniques they need to know and making them successful, right? Because so many of those kids drop out. Once they get out of school, they are drawing in every moment that they're doing because it's the only way they can stay sane, and or they're painting or whatever, and they're working at McDonald's because, and their parents are like, oh, you could be better than, why don't you go do this, go and do it. And it's because that was never their purpose, and nobody ever focused on where their purpose could be, right? And then they end up being alcoholics and drug addicts and everything else to deal with the fact that they're miserable. Goes back to the Jordan Peterson thing I said, that, you know, if a creative person is not creative, they rot.
Right.
It's like, I used to say it like this years ago when I was more philosophical about art. Like creativity is like something flowing through you. It's not something that you make up. It's something that's just constantly flowing through you.
Yeah, it's like a river of
and
creative.
Not being able to be creative or being stuck on the same project for too long. And this is what happens with writer's block. It's like that. It's flowing through you and something stops it up.
Yes.
Right. And it starts to be becoming like rot. It doesn't do like water that builds up and then gushes out into this wonderful fountain. No, What it does is it sits in there stagnant and it starts making you miserable.
Right. Well, it's like when I wrote my second PJ book, right? I literally wrote it on 2-hour-and-a-half flights on the way flying home, right? And like it took me longer to edit it than it took me to write it. The energy just flowed, and the feeling to write it was amazing, right? And the typing it slowed me down, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I can't type fast enough because the words were just flowing. And so when the creativity flows, you just got to go with it, right? It's just timing, right? And sometimes airplane flights are irritating, but not when I was typing, man. It was just flowing. And when that conscious thought flies, time flies, and you forget how long it actually takes, and you're just in the moment, and you're just like, it's Zen, right? When creation takes place, you just go with it. Well, even when we were creating the cartoon for the 7 Habits, right? You forget the timing, and you're in the moment, right? In the moment times are just, that's when you're having the fun.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I think for all artists is they have to. There's the discipline. Then there's the discipline side, right? Artists tend to naturally be undisciplined human beings. So they have to. This is why you have acting technique, why you have drawing technique. But the discipline side is, I know a guy, Academy Award nominated playwright, writer, right, screenwriter, who said, write every day. Doesn't matter, but I'm gonna dedicate at least this much time every day to write. And I'm going to say what his method was, I'm going to commit 10 days to writing this idea, right? So he was going to do it for 10 days, and then he had a drawer he dropped it into. And then he was going to pick up another idea and do it for 10 days. Now, if he needs to keep writing on the same idea for more than 10 days, he's going to do that. But he's going to go to the next one. And then whenever he doesn't know what to write on, he goes to the drawer and he starts reading the things that he already wrote and decides which one he's going to start working on a little bit more and rewriting. So over the years, and that's actually how he got his first Tony Award. His first Tony Award, or was it Obie or something, one of those, he got because he had saw a guy and a girl at a diner, like doing a little flirting thing, as he got off a shift and she was getting on shift. They were flirting with each other. So he started writing it as he was driving. He was driving home and is telling his wife and she said this and they said that, and they're so excited about watching these people. And then they started making up other things about them and creating characters like that. And when he got home, he typed it all up and threw it in a drawer for years. And then he was like looking through his drawer and was like, hey, I could work on this. And he wrote When You Coming Back, Red Ryder. His name is Mark Medoff. And it became this great play. He went on to write Children of a Lesser God, and he wrote City of City of Joy with Patrick Swayze. He wrote Good Guys Wear Black, Chuck Norris movie, right? Wonderful person, wonderful writer, but he's the one who's told me, he'll bet you write every day because you're a writer, right? And it was a discipline thing. And I think that people always talk about their writer block. Writer block is when you can't finish. So move on to something else and write something else. Or write something shorter so that you finish, right? Or write something that's terrible and throw it in the drawer, because later on you can refine it into something better, right? So that's just
do something else, right? It might not be writing. Go do something else.
Yeah. Well, and he had other things that he did, but I mean, because he's a writer, he wrote every day. And I think that's for everybody. I mean, if you're an artist, work on one thing, right? And finish it. Even if it's like you're going to do it for a little while and you're going to put it aside and then start on something new, and then go back to it. You know, Leonardo da Vinci almost finished nothing. There's actually very few paintings that are finished painting by Leonardo da Vinci, because he famously worked out once he worked out all the nuts and bolts of a painting, would abandon it like halfway through, because it was all about the math and the design, right? And he was trying to figure things out about life and about.
Well, then I guess we're done with our app then, if we just abandon.
No, but then we have a company. That's a totally different thing.
Yes, I know.
We have to constantly serve people and constantly find better ways to serve people.
You can't halfway abandon an app.
And that takes us into the big subject that I wanted to talk about. And we might not even get all of it done today.
That's okay.
But it's what makes an influencer? What is an influencer?
Yes.
Right.
And did you want to talk about the other topics of the big topics we were talking about?
Which ones?
Talk
about them, and I can cut, dude. We can talk about whatever we want.
Yes, I know. Wait. Not the Unbreakable. The content. The TikTok privacy policies.
Oh yeah, we can talk about those things a little bit. I had a different plan for those things than about this, what we're doing. I wanted to talk mostly about influencers, right? And us to create really a thing of value for influencers, right? But we can talk about that too, because that's definitely, in the end, that comes down to why we started our company, right?
Yes.
TikTok, TikTok basically, when you give them permission, you give them permission to use you as a spy on everything you come in contact with that's electronic.
Yes.
If you want to break it down to like the real, what they're basically giving you, you're giving them permission to, including your keystrokes, which means they know all your passwords.
And you're giving it to the Chinese government, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, let's get to real, man. The truth is, so there was this big activist, I think in Ghana or one of those, or Uganda, and he was like a musician, big activist, and he was using WhatsApp in order to keep people from knowing what he was doing, right? And he would organize these rallies using WhatsApp, but then after a little bit, all of a sudden the authorities were showing up for his rallies as fast as anybody else was, and coming after him, right? So what happened is the Wi-Fi network or internet 5G network for that country was a Chinese company. They went, the government of that country went to the Chinese government and asked them to help them track this guy because he was using apps that they couldn't track. So they actually did an update. They put an update into the internet provider, whatever, that made the person download a thing that took screenshots of the guy's phone regularly without him knowing it. And then, so when he was on WhatsApp, whenever he would open up WhatsApp, it would start screenshotting everything he was writing and sending it to them and telling them what it was on his WhatsApp. They hacked WhatsApp basically for him at a government level, right? So if you think that TikTok, which is like 40% owned by the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government, would not implement a similar thing when you've already given them full authority to look at everything that's on your phone, including your files. That's an issue.
Yeah,
right?
it's a big issue.
And I mean, there's a reason why the federal government just banned it on all government
federal government phones, and
there
why
are now
all the schools, basically school after school, is jumping on.
They have to, because they get federal money to run their internet. Almost every school gets federal money for its internet provider and stuff like that. And when I was in school, that's why you had certain policies and stuff like that enacted. Most libraries all have these. That's all government money. And they have to,
and it's a good chunk of money, so they're definitely gonna ban it.
I mean, public schools, not just public schools, or even charter schools and whatnot. They have so much. They can't do they can't do the technology they do without the government money.
Yep.
They don't have the funding without federal money to do it in almost every case.
Yep.
And therefore, they're going to all have to comply to that. So almost everywhere that you're going to have government money Wi-Fi, I can see this happening. The downtown San Antonio Wi-Fi system, and Corpus Christi has a downtown Wi-Fi system where everybody can log in. Eventually, those things are all going to make it so you can't TikTok on there. They'll have to.
Yeah.
Because if you have access to one, you have access to everything on that wireless network.
Yep.
Right?
So that is an evolution of our product that we want to be similar to TikTok, and basically
without being an aggressively prying human being.
Yeah.
And also, I mean,
but
this
algorithm, we want to look like TikTok, not be aggressive like TikTok. Let's make sure we make the difference of that.
Well, and there's wonderful things on TikTok, right? Probably 1 in 5 things are pretty cool, and you're mostly flipping through the other 4.
Right.
But there are this is the great thing about social media, right? This is where I wish the whole world could be like just this, right? There's this video, and I'm going to actually cut away and I'll show it, or part of it. So there's a little boy who's probably 4 years old, who's singing, "Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be all right.
Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be all right."
Right? And he sings the whole song. Beautiful. And I saw the original when it came out. So then musicians all around the world have started taking him and singing with him and creating this beautiful thing with him as the lead singer, and these other musicians have been like adding in the music with him.
How fun.
Right? And singing with him. It's wonderful, right? This is what makes social media, to me, the most valuable thing that it could be, right?
Yeah.
Is the ability for people to collaborate on beautiful things. And that's one of the things I think TikTok has that nobody else has. You can't collaborate like this on any of the other platforms, right? Is where you can duet with somebody and you add your thing, and then somebody else can duet in with them. And then you have whole like bands that form on TikTok of people that don't know each other.
Right.
But they all get in there and jam together and sing a song.
Duets.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, this is what makes humanity. The beauty of humanity is this ability for us to get together and do something really wonderful together. And in this case, people that don't even know each other.
Yeah.
Right.
That's cool.
And if we can be anything, that's what we need to be.
Yes.
Right. Forget about money, all that stuff. Money is only fuel.
Yes.
Money is just the way you get where you're trying to go to, right? It just keeps you on the trip. Keeps you in the air if you're, if you're trying to fly.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's about that.
Yes,
To me, it's always been about that,
absolutely.
right? And I like my little house and I like to keep it, and I like my truck and I like to keep it. But those things, but I don't need anything more than that for me, right?
Let's make sure
I-
Bob keeps his house
Yeah.
and his truck.
Yeah. But what I do want is to see people do something beautiful, and to see the best. That's the best in humanity, right? That literally is the best in humanity. Is people coming together, and whenever people see somebody in trouble, and they go like, how can we help? Let's get there. Let's do that, right? But even more when we're not in trouble and we're just being alive and we share that. That's what's beautiful, right?
Yes.
And that's really what the whole thing about this whole influencer mentality is, right?